This week on the show, we're looking at Space Jam gains, Loki loses, AI, Netflix plays, Marvel vs. DC, and more right here on the JARcast. Welcome to episode 26 of the JARcast Movie Podcast. Thank you very much for coming and hanging out on this fantabulous Tuesday night, the 7th, or not the 7th, but July the 20th of 2021. I am Jake from Jacob Anders Reviews, your host for this week's show, and we got a few things to talk about. It's been a slow summer overall, so not like a ton of big, huge, heavy hitter stories, but we got a couple of interesting stories to check out. That is for sure. I'll try and keep it brief, but with that, let's jump into our first story. So our first story of the night, as it is or has been for the past few weeks, does deal with the box office receipts. How are things doing all over the world? Because big movies are finally coming out in theaters, and theaters are actually a thing again. And last week we talked a lot about Black Widow, and we're going to talk a little bit about Black Widow this week. And I figured Black Widow is the one we'd be talking about taking that number one spot. But color me surprised, even though I didn't think Black Widow was going to do gangbusters, I was very surprised to see that it was actually dethroned, and by the one and only Space Jam 2, aka Space Jam: A New Legacy. Yes, that movie actually dethroned an MCU movie. Now that doesn't mean that Black Widow just totally did nothing, but it definitely didn't do what the MCU movies typically do. It is not performing as well as past MCU movies have. And they've had all kinds of reasons as to why that is. But let's jump right into this story, and then we'll talk about it. The Warner Brothers sequel to 1996's Space Jam sailed past forecast, which projected the film would bring in $20 million in its first 3 days of release. Critics rebuffed Space Jam: A New Legacy. It holds a bleak 31% average on Rotten Tomatoes. But audiences appeared to embrace the movie, awarding it an A- cinema score. Yeah, I've seen that. You see that a lot with movies. It's usually one way or the other. Yes, some movies kind of balance out between the critic score and the audience score, but a lot of the times, especially with very divisive films, you'll see critics will side with one way or the other, and they'll just like either trash a movie or talk about how great it is, and audiences will go the exact other way. And apparently, while yes, most critics are not really that high on Space Jam: A New Legacy, audiences are enjoying it. And if you watch my review of it, shameless plug, you'll know why I personally think that is. That's because critics are all adults, and the adults that liked the original Space Jam when they were kids are not kids anymore because it's a fucking kids movie. Not a family movie, it's a kids movie. This movie and the original is squarely positioned to target children, not family so much. I guess some would call it a family film, but me, myself, personally, I think it is much more, it's not like something like Shrek that's kind of like targeting, hey, yeah, this is a kid's movie, but we're going to call it a family movie because we got something for the adults too. This is straight up for kids. And we're not kids anymore. People that are reviewing movies and things, we're not kids. We're adults. So we look at this movie and we're like, it's not as good as the original. But that's because we're adults when we're seeing it. If we had seen the original as adults, we probably would have been like, it is what it is. And honestly, the movie does do what it's supposed to do for its target audience. So that's why the audiences, which is primarily children, yes, I know adults are putting these reviews in, but they are taking their children and their kids liked it. So they're saying, hey, yeah, it was good. My kids liked it. They had a good time. So I had a good time. If you've ever taken children to a movie theater, you know what I'm talking about. If your kid's happy while you're at the movie theater, you're fucking happy because you're like, thank God it worked out. So yes, Space Jam was number one with, I think it ended up doing $31.6 million or something like that, which isn't like gangbusters, but for a pandemic era, especially when this movie is also available for free to subscribers on HBO Max day and date, that's a nice sum of money. The better than expected start for Space Jam 2 pushed last weekend's champion, Disney and Marvel's Black Widow, to second place on box office charts. The superhero adventure starring Scarlett Johansson brought in $26.3 million in its second weekend, representing a steep 67% decline from inaugural sales. So far, Black Widow has generated $131 million in North America and $264 million globally. Okay, so that sounds okay, right? That's a lot of money, right? Well, yeah. Depending on how you look at it, Black Widow cost $200 million to make, and as I've said many times, and it is just kind of common knowledge that in order for a movie to be profitable, especially these big tentpole films like Black Widow, they have to double their budget to cover everything else that it costs. Because when they say budget, they don't include like marketing and all that stuff. Typically, it's double the movie's budget. So Black Widow needs to make $400 million to even begin to be profitable. And right now, after its second weekend in theaters, it's sitting at $264 million, and that's globally. That's everywhere. 131 here in America. I don't think it's going to do it. I mean, it might make it to 400, but I don't think it's going to make it much past 400. So Black Widow is probably going to be the first financial failure, if you will, for the MCU, especially the modern MCU. And that's saying something. And people are throwing all kinds of reasons out there. Well, it's on Disney Plus. Well, people are paying $30 extra on top of subscriptions on Disney Plus, so they're making money there too. And hey, Space Jam 2 is without a subscription, or with just a subscription and no extra amount. It's on HBO Max, and it still outdid it. Now, this is Space Jam's first weekend versus Black Widow's second weekend. I'm not discounting that, but 67 decline week by week is the biggest decline of any MCU movie ever. So that's crazy. Even like that's more of a decline than like the Incredible Hulk, which was technically the first Disney or the first MCU movie. It is definitely the biggest decline by far since Disney bought Marvel back in 2012, 11, long time ago. So Black Widow, it's not looking good for them. Now, Space Jam: A New Legacy, just because it was number one, doesn't mean it's doing great as of yet either unto itself. It costs only compared to Black Widow, $150 million. So that means it needs to make $300 million in order to be profitable. Will it make it? I don't know. I'm kind of wondering if it will as well. I mean, its opening weekend is typically your biggest weekend. And I think that Warner Brothers does take more into account how much they're making as far as subscribers. Like of course, they're not charging an extra amount to watch their movies, but they look at it and say, well, when this movie released, we had a spike in subscribers by this much. They look at the opportunity cost or the opportunity amount that they made, and they take that more into account. And I think they're okay with that. Now, whether it's going to pay off to a $150 million budget, I don't know. Will Space Jam make $300 million worldwide? I don't know. The other thing, real quick, I wanted to point out was this article, because there are people just throwing all kinds of reasons as to why Black Widow, like Disney's just throwing shit out all over the place. No, it's not a failure. It's not a failure. This is why. Look, I'm not saying it's an absolute failure, but by your scale, MCU, it's kind of a failure. So I don't think it's the worst MCU movie either. You check out my review, second shameless plug, and see that I didn't think the movie was terrible. I don't think it's great either. I just think it's kind of, it's fine, it's whatever. And I think that word's gotten out there because that's kind of the general consensus that most people are saying, is that they think the movie's just, it's fine, but, don't go out of your way to see it. When it comes on streaming, check it out. And I think the movie will have some long legs on streaming, but not necessarily paying $30 on top of your subscription or getting out right now and going to a theater to see it. Regardless of all the excuses they're giving, that's what it is. The movie's word got out there. That Friday that it released, it did really well for this day and age. But then the very next day, it had a steep 80-something% decline day to day. And that's the biggest decline either. The records that this movie is setting is it has the biggest declines of any MCU movie day to day and week to week ever. So these are not the records you want to set. And now it's been outdone by essentially a kids movie. A kids movie that everybody is rating like shit too, by the way. So take that as you will. I'm interested to see how these two films do next week. It'll give us a better idea as to whether they're going to meet their target goal to be successful. And once again, success for these two movies, Space Jam, like I said, to make its budget, $300 million. Black Widow, $400 million. Just because they hit that doesn't mean it's successful. They need to make more than that, because once they get there, okay, everything after that is a profit. So the studios want them to make a whole lot more money after that so they can make money and say, hey, it was worth it because we made this much money. So they got to get to that point to where they can be profitable first, and they're a long way away from that. I mean, Black Widow globally, $264 million. They still got, what, $145-ish, $146 million to go. I mean, that's not 145, $135 million to go, and it's going into its third week. I don't know, man. That's going to be a tough sell right there. But we'll see next week. I am interested to see how these two movies fare. There's nothing really big coming out next week, so I think it will be between these two movies as to who's number one again. G.I. Joe's coming out, but let's be real. G.I. Joe. M. Night Shyamalan's Old is coming out as well. It might do well. We'll see. He still has some clout behind his name, but well, once again, it's really up in the air. These are the true blockbusters of the next couple of weeks. So let's see how they turn out. Now, from there, getting all that box office stuff out of the way, while Space Jam is out there just making huge gains, more than I ever thought it would be. I did not think the movie was going to be that popular, but it's making them gains. Somebody else is making them losses, and it's once again Marvel and Disney. But this one, you could put a positive spin on it, I guess. And I'm talking about my man Loki. We got a loss for Loki, and Loki has lost its director. Many of you that I'm not going to spoil anything, but season 1 of Loki ended with informing us, the viewer, that Loki was returning in Loki season 2, which I myself was very happy to hear because I haven't done a review of this series. I've considered doing one of all 3 of the Marvel films or Marvel series up to this point. I think by a fair long shot that Loki is the better of these 3. I mean, it has been the most entertaining and the one I enjoyed the most. Is it the best show ever? No, but I did enjoy this show week to week. Now, I do like time travel stuff and more sci-fi stuff, so maybe that had something to do with it. But overall, Loki has had the best story compared to WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. WandaVision was way too long. It should have been cut down quite a few episodes, and it was more experimental, and it de-evolved. It started with like this interesting take and then just kind of de-evolved into like light beam in the sky, people flying around, CG people fighting, and it just kind of lost some of that creativity closer to the end. And Falcon and the Winter Soldier just never took off. It was just, I didn't think that show was good at all. I mean, I kept trying to stay with it and say, okay, this show's going to pull through, but it didn't. It was, at the end of the day, just extremely forgettable and just not very good. It looked really good. They all look really good, but it just, from a narrative perspective and an entertainment perspective, those two were definitely lacking for me. But Loki did keep me entertained, so I was happy to hear that we are officially getting a season 2 of that show. However, the director, Kate Herron, will not be returning for season 2. Marvel's Loki series had its final air on Disney Plus this week, actually last week, and had a pretty big reveal that will likely echo throughout Phase 4 and possibly beyond that. At the end of the episode, the other big announcement was Marvel Studios confirming that they would indeed be moving forward with a second season. Yeah, that paragraph right there probably summarized everything I said a lot easier. Sadly, it has been announced at Deadline that series director and executive producer Kate Herron will not return for season 2. In her words, "I'm not returning," Herron told Deadline. "I always planned to be just for this. And to be honest, season 2 wasn't in the cards. That's something that just came out, and I'm so excited. I'm really happy to watch it as a fan next season, but I just think I'm proud of what we did here. And I've given it my all. I'm working on some other stuff yet to be announced. Also, she isn't planning on coming back to Marvel Studios anytime soon. No, I'm just focused on my own stuff at the moment. I love Marvel, and I'd love to work with them again at some point, but my outing with Loki is what I've done with them thus far, and all it's going to be for a while." Herron responded when she was asked if she would be working on upcoming MCU projects. So, this somewhat ties into a story I have in a little bit with somewhat concerns Marvel as well. And it sounds like she enjoyed her time. She liked working on the show. She told the story she wanted to tell, but now she wants to go do her own stuff. She seems like a creative person, a creative director who is less interested in making it big. I mean, I'm sure she wants to make it big. And I mean, she's involved with the Marvel product, so she's made it. And she's more interested in going and finding, and doing something that's interesting to her. And I respect that. She's not bad-mouthing them. She said she had a good time. She said she might even want to do work with them in the future, but not now. And that's something big. They probably offered her, hey, we're going to do season 2 because the show's already charting real well. Want to come back? And she's like, no, I got some other stuff I'm working on. And I think that for someone, any director, especially a smaller, unknown director such as herself, to turn down Marvel means that they're wanting to do, they're wanting to do it for their own creative reasons. And I think that's the reason you should make films and stuff like that, because they want to get out there and do their own thing. So that's really admirable of her. Me, myself, personally, as I said, I thought this show was really creative. I really did enjoy it. And while the director, especially when it comes to Marvel things, which we'll see here in a few minutes with another story, isn't the only voice that we hear with a movie or TV show, the director and the executive producer and all that she had a few hands in this pot. She definitely does, maybe not as much on Marvel products, she still does have quite an influence over the project. Once again, Marvel products got a whole lot of different people with their input on them, more so than some films. So maybe not quite as much control, but she still did have some. I'm sure she was the friggin' director. She probably her vision is there, and I gotta say that was probably one of the things that made the show what it was her vision and how she did this. So when it comes to her not being there for next season, I gotta wonder, is next season going to suffer because of that? I mean, or who are they going to put in her place? It might not. They might get somebody who's already there, because once again, it's not just one single person. There are multiple voices that we hear, and if everyone else involved is still there, one person doesn't make a movie or a show. So if everybody else is still there, maybe we won't even notice. But you hear about directors leaving projects, and then they go on and continue, and they're just not the same. And it's missing something, and that something is that creative force behind that person that left. So hopefully that's not it, because I really did enjoy Loki, and I'm looking forward to seeing more from it, and I'm interested to see what happens with Season 2. I don't think we're going to get Season 2 anytime soon. I think that it'll be at least a year away, because some of the things that happen in the end of the show, I do know that are going to tie directly into some of the films that are coming, I think. So I think we got to see those movies first, and especially like Spider-Man, which comes out later this year, and then Doctor Strange comes out early next year. So I think that we won't see Loki Season 2 until at least after Doctor Strange Part 2 in the Multiverse of Madness or whatever it's called. It's going to tie heavily into this, I think, or some of this is going to tie heavily into that. So I would say that it's probably going to be at least a year away before we see Loki Season 2. But when we do, I'm very interested to see, are they going to be able to keep it up? Are they going to be able to keep that same tone and enjoyment going? Or is it going to devolve into something like WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier did? Please, God, don't turn into Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That show was just not very good. Okie dokie. Now, speaking of, as I mentioned, I had a little bit more Marvel news. This isn't strictly Marvel either. This is Marvel and another company. I do have, we know that Marvel and DC, they both are comic book companies, and they make comic book movies. So they are both working on a similar playing ground, or playing field, if you will, making similar projects. So you got to wonder, how is it making movies there? I mean, how is their creative process? How involved are they? How much? Because, you look at Marvel movies, and they are very, they're all very interconnected. That's their thing. You look at DC, and they're all kind of separate. They've tried to be interconnected here or there, and some of them are, but a lot of them are very, different, almost like different universes, but the same characters. They kind of go their own ways. And I think both of these avenues have their own pluses and minuses, and we are hearing from the inside now from someone who has actually, I think maybe not the only person, but definitely the only high-profile director who's ever worked with both companies, and that would be Mr. James Gunn. is talking about Marvel and DC and the differences between working with these two companies. And there's some stuff in here that I thought was kind of interesting and shed some light on some things that, not really shed light on them, it was things that I think a lot of people already kind of knew or suspected, and he just kind of elegantly, by the way, just put it out there, just kind of solidified a lot of it. Director James Gunn has been on an emotional roller coaster in the past few years. He had an incredible success with the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies from Marvel. Then, in the summer of 2018, controversial old tweets of Gunn surfaced, and he was fired by the company as a result. He publicly apologized, and the cast of Guardians of the Galaxy railed around him. In the meantime, he was able to secure another major gig, writing and directing DC's The Suicide Squad, coming soon. After all that, Marvel would end up hiring him back for Guardians of the Galaxy 3. So now he's set to have major films coming out for both studios. Okay, for those of you who don't know, a brief synopsis of what happened to him. He was, of course, working with making Guardians of the Galaxy. He made part 1, made part 2. Working on part 3, gonna get it going, and then some old tweets from like 10 years prior showed up. They weren't anything really that bad. They were just kind of like bad taste jokes, if you will. I mean, I guess depending on who you look at. But they were like 10 fucking years old, resurfaced, and Disney fired him over them. Over fucking tweets. That is ridiculous, might I say. But anyway, they fired him over these tweets, and pretty much all the cast of Guardians of the Galaxy rallied behind him and was like, look, if you don't bring him back, you need to bring him back. And even some of them did go as far as to say, which I think Dave Bautista was definitely the one who was most vocal, and said, if you don't bring him back, I'm not making the next movie without him. I think that was probably one of the things that really pushed Disney to hire him back. But in between the time that they fired him and they hired him back, and he was canceled or attempted to be canceled, they came back and said, or he said, well, they let me go. It's their business. Whatever. I got to work. So he went and got other jobs, and he made Brightburn. Well, he didn't make it. He produced and wrote, I believe, Brightburn a few years ago. That's when all that was going on, by the way. And he also went, and DC scooped him up to do the sequel or quasi reboot of The Suicide Squad that's coming out this August. And then somewhere in there, Disney called him back and said, hey, just playing, come on back, because, Guardians of the Galaxy is really big, and we want you to, direct it and stuff. So we want all the people to be in it. So that's what happened there, and that's where we're at now. In an interview with the New York Times, Gunn was pretty forthcoming about the differences between the two companies' movie-making strategies. There's no doubt Kevin Feige, he's kind of like the overseer of all things Marvel, by the way, is way more involved with editing than people are at Warner Brothers, which owns DC. Then again, I have more problems. Oh, I skipped something. He gives more notes. You don't have to take them, and I don't always take them. Then again, I have more problems, Gunn explained. If you saw the first cut of Guardians 1, it had more problems because that was my first time making something so gigantic, and there's some learning to what works and what doesn't, carving away the excess stuff. The truth is, as Marvel goes on and Kevin Feige starts to amass ownership of half of all film in general, he's more spread out. He noted that Marvel tries to keep the styles of their films at least somewhat similar when DC was allowed for much more varied storytelling. There's a lot more room for variety at DC, which Gunn finds exciting. Now, I find that really interesting, and see, people have kind of like ragged on DC for not having as much of a connected universe as Marvel, and I do think that while, yeah, they were trying to do that for a while with like the Snyderverse and everything, and that had its merits. I think DC finally said, well, yeah, they have some of their properties that are connected. They finally just said, okay, we're going to embrace this pseudo-multiverse view. I know it's a Marvel thing, but I can't remember what DC's version of that is. We're going to embrace that and just bring on creative filmmakers to make their own creative visions of our characters, that while they're all in the same universe, they're not necessarily in the same world. That's how we end up with, yeah, we get some bad movies for sure, like the original Suicide Squad, but then we get some amazing movies like the Dark Knight trilogy. We get Joker. We get, hopefully, this new Suicide Squad movie, Zack Snyder's Justice League. things like that, because they do allow, they're not saying that you have to stay strict to this, and by the way, you need to add this and put this into your movie that it was never there because we have a movie later on that we need you to reference and things like that. That's Marvel's way. Now, obviously, that's worked for Marvel as well, but I do think that that is a much more constricted, creative-wise environment, and I think that some of the more creative directors out there are kind of like, they'll go do it, but then they're like, I'm not wanting... I kind of like the idea of having more creative license when I'm doing things, and this is a little bit constricting. So anyway, the Marvel Universe has always been a little more cohesive, and DC has always had more single runs. They had The Dark Knight Returns, they had Watchmen, they had The Killing Joke, and they had Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. He's talking about the comic books, which the comic books are like that as well. I'm not as big into comic books now than I was years and years and years ago, but DC has always been a bit more kind of fragmented and do their own thing. And Marvel, while they have that as well, they've always been a bit more about interconnectivity. So even in the comic book world, it was like that. Gunn explained, if you saw that's the wrong paragraph there, buddy. The fact that they did Joker, which is totally different type of movie, that to me is so cool. I'm very excited about Matt Reeves' The Batman movie. They're getting some really good filmmakers involved. They're always going to be hit or miss, though. I just don't want them to get boring. And that's the thing right there. Since they don't have that through line, that thing that's keeping them all, that one person, if you will, that's saying, okay, let's make sure these things all line up, I think it does allow them more opportunity to be creative, but it also allows them a bit more opportunity to have lackluster products. So, yes, there's been some bad DC movies for sure, but there's been some great ones as well. And I think Marvel is a little bit more in the middle, where there's been some great ones and some bad ones, but I think there's been far less bad Marvel movies as DC, but I think there's been far less great Marvel movies as DC great movies as well. Marvel is much more just really good, solid. They've been very solid, but they've got more solid movies than DC. DC's just kind of all over the place. So it's kind of like, you can get greatness sometimes, but then other times you get, what the fuck is that? Suicide Squad. I have no clue what I'm going to do next. For me, Guardians 3 is probably the last one. That is interesting to me because that's him pretty much saying he went through all this, Disney brought him back, but after doing this film, most likely he's not going to do another Marvel movie. So he's going to step away from Marvel and go do his own thing. Much like Kate Herron in the previous story, I think it's because he wants to just go have some creative license. He wants to be free. James Gunn, if you look at his previous work, he's a creative guy. He wants to be let loose to do his own thing. And my understanding is when he made the Suicide Squad that's coming soon, that's kind of what he did. He let loose and just went crazy, and apparently it's supposed to be really cool. And we'll find out in August. I love toys and the explosions and the cameras. Frankly, I love to be able to work on a big playing field. If I had a smaller, more intimate thing I wanted to do, I would definitely do that, Gunn said. Right now, I really just want a nap, but I still have another major motion picture to make before that. Suicide Squad is in theaters and on HBO Max on August 6th, 2021, right around the corner. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is set to premiere in theaters on May 23rd, 2023. So, yeah, I think that both these movies are probably going to be solid, if not really good. I really enjoy the Guardians of the Galaxy films. I think they are some of the best in the Marvel Universe. And I think that since they have, up until Endgame at least, been kind of a bit disconnected from the rest of the MCU, that has allowed him to have a bit more creative license with what he's doing. And as the Guardians of the Galaxy kind of get assimilated more into the current Marvel world, they're not like on the other side of the galaxy, if you will. So their actions they have more repercussions now because they're involved with like Thor and all these other movies they're showing up in and stuff like that. I think that it's kind of starting to constrain that a bit more, and he's like, I don't like that. And I think that's kind of the downside to Marvel and DC, the downs and ups, if you will. And I think a lot of people have, and me myself at least, have always kind of thought that Marvel is probably much more constrictive, less open to creative ideas, or as many creative ideas. Everything has to go through like a committee. And DC's probably, or Warner Brothers rather, which is essentially DC, is more, yeah, come on in, let's just hire somebody who has some fantastic talent, let them run wild and see what they do. Sometimes that works out fantastically. Sometimes it doesn't. So it's kind of like you got to take the good with the bad. Marvel, their approach, they're not allowing the great directors they get in some cases to be great. They're getting solid movies out of them. Yeah, they're not bad, and that's good. They're very entertaining. They're crowd-pleasing, but they're just that. They're solid, and they're not letting this person really realize their greatness. That's my opinion. I don't know what you guys think. It sounds like James Gunn, who is a creator, he kind of feels that way as well. All right, speaking of greatness, at one point in time that may or may not be great anymore, depending on who you are and who you ask, this next story there's a new movie that is finally, or not finally, it's entered production that I didn't even know was a thing. I'm aware of the franchise. I really enjoy the first film in the franchise. The second one is fine. It's okay. And I never thought they needed a third, nor did I think they were going to do a third, but apparently it's happening. What I'm talking about, ladies and jelly spoons, is Clerks 3 is in production. For what it's worth. Sure. Okay. Lionsgate has acquired worldwide rights to Kevin Smith's third outing in the Clerks series, which is now in pre-production in New Jersey and is set to start shooting next month on location. Smith wrote the screenplay and will direct the film, with all major actors reprising their original roles from the original two films. That's cool. I mean, if they're going to do it, it's neat to see that they're bringing back all the people from those original movies and not, missing some people. It looks like everybody from those movies that was left, or all the people of note, are coming back. So, I mean, that's a plus, but Kevin Smith has always kind of been known to kind of have like this family dynamic on his films where he just gets these actors in on his movies, kind of like Robert Rodriguez does, where he over time has amassed this actor family within his movies, and they all love him so much that they want to come back and work with him. And I could understand why, especially with some of his earlier stuff. In this story, this is in his words, by the way, in the story this time, I gave Randall the heart attack that almost killed me, Smith said on Instagram, referring to his own health crisis that inspired the movie. But rather than succumb to the reality of middle age, Randall rages against the dying light by telling the story of his life in an indie film he shoots with his fellow clerks at the Quick Stop. 27 years ago, I made a movie about Dante and Randall that made my dreams come true and changed my life. So now I get to return the favor. Okay. I love Clerks. I saw Clerks in the theater. My dad and my sister took me to see Clerks in 1993, whenever it came out. It was in theaters. And I fell in love with it then. We were the only people in the theater. I think there was like one other patron in there. So I love that movie. I've loved it since it originally came out. The second one came out, I was excited about, and I thought it was all right. It was okay. That was, in my opinion, at the beginning of when Kevin Smith started to kind of go down a road that I didn't know if I was prepared to follow him down. His movies are very hit or miss now. That's the thing. It's like I'm not going to say he's not trying. He's making movies he wants to make, but it's not that he's not trying, but it's like, and I respect the fact that it seems like he's making a movie he wants and that's it, but it's like he's not really trying to appeal to anybody. And I get it. Make the movie you want to make, but you still got to try to appeal to your audience in some way. And that's just not what we're getting. I mean, Jay and Silent Bob reboot was just not good, in my opinion. I know some people liked it, but more people didn't, and I agree with them. That movie, especially compared to like Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, just wasn't a good movie. It was just tired and just really sad. And I'm afraid that's what we're going to get here. Because Clerks 2, while I still overall enjoyed that film, it had a few moments where it teetered on that, where it was like, is this movie's getting a little tired. He doesn't seem as sharp as he used to. So I don't know what we're going to get with Clerks 3. Maybe it'll be a resurgence. We'll get a Kevin Smith, what do they call it? I don't know, where he has like a resurgence and gets back to basics, if you will. We'll find out. I am a big fan of Smith's work from back in the day for sure, but admittedly, I'm not as really excited about this as I would have been if you had told me about it 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if you'd said Clerks 3 is coming, I would have been like, fuck yeah. Now I'm just kind of like, who knows what we're going to get. So I'll definitely watch it when it comes out, and they're starting shooting next month, so I don't imagine it'll take too long to cut this movie together. And it is being covered, it's being financed by a major studio, so it's not like he has to go crowdfund it or anything and run out of money. So he's got the money to do it. So I imagine we'll see this movie within a year, if I had to guess. I bet by this time next year we would have already seen Clerks 3, or at least be coming out around this time. So we'll know sooner or later whether Clerks 3 is a good idea or not. If you ask me if I had to give an answer whether I thought it was a good idea or not, as it stands right now, I'm going to say no, it's probably not a good idea. I don't see it really adding anything to the story, but I hope I'm wrong as hell. I hope Clerks 3 is amazing, and it really goes back, and I laugh my fucking ass off from beginning to end, because that's what I really want, because Kevin Smith has it in him to do that, and I just hope he, gets back to that, man. Like, go back and to your roots or something. Which, the guy's... He's like every geek's hero in a way, because he is just like that geeky guy who really just like made it and gets to do whatever he wants. But it's like, I don't know. While I do think he's trying with his films, at the same time, it almost seems like he's just not trying anymore. He's just like, he's having fun. It's like him and his friends get together and are shooting it, and we're just watching them have fun. His movies are more meta than anything now. It's just watching people having a great time together. But you're not having a great time just watching these people have a great time, instead of him actually trying to create a cohesive narrative so that we have a great time too. Just saying. That's my opinion on it. Not to be negative, but I don't know. I hope Clerks 3 is good, but I don't have a lot of faith in it right now. All right, so from there, we're going to go into something a little bit more heavy. And this is a bit of a callback, if you will, in some ways, to a story I talked about a few weeks ago concerning Paul Walker. This isn't about Paul Walker, but it's similar ethics-wise about Paul Walker and them possibly bringing him back for the Fast and Furious movies in the future via technology. Is that ethically okay? Should they do it? Ultimately, his family was on board and said, yes, he would love this, he would want this. We're behind it. We're with you. If you want to do it, we're here to help in any way we can. And in that case, I'm like, yeah, okay. If his family's there and they knew him best and they're, totally behind it and say they want to help, then I guess I don't have a problem with it. Granted, at first glance, it's kind of like, oh, the guy died and you're going to bring him back digitally? I don't know how I feel about that. They did it for the 7th movie, but they kind of had to. They were in the middle of it. I got it there. This is an all-new movie, and the guy's been dead for a little while now. I don't know. But, like I said, family says cool. Okay, I'm cool with it. But we're not talking about Paul Walker. We are talking about a similar situation that just happened and broke this week for a recent movie that just released. I am talking about Roadrunner, the Anthony Bourdain story. I don't think that's what it's actually. The movie's called Roadrunner. It's a new documentary about Anthony Bourdain, which some of you may know committed suicide a few years ago. He was a food critic, and he did some other stuff. I was familiar with his name. I knew his face. I'd seen him, but I didn't watch his stuff. I'm not 100% familiar with everything he did. I knew he was on TV, and he was a reporter of sorts, but he was very popular, and he apparently had some issues and committed suicide a few years ago, but they made this documentary about him called Roadrunner. And apparently it just came out at the beginning of this week. The movie just had an official release on Friday, but a lot of people have seen it. A lot of people have been rating it very high, saying it was great. I actually had no interest in seeing it, but in speaking with some of my comrades here on YouTube and just hearing some of the other reviews, I said, you know what, I might want to check this movie out. This seems like one of those movies that I have no interest in and wouldn't really look at, but then I'll finally see and be like, oh, that was great. That was so good and amazing. So I was interested in seeing it because hearing what they had to say about it. But apparently people's opinion of the movie is changing because there are a few lines of dialogue, no more than 60 seconds according to the director, that they used AI technology to simulate his voice to say a few lines in narration. They used a lot of his because he did videos and he was a reporter and stuff. There's a lot of recordings of his voice. They used a lot of that to narrate the film and talk over the film. Once again, I haven't seen it. I can't say for sure, but that's what I'm gathering from the review, from the interview, or from the story. And they simulated his voice with AI for less than a minute of it. And people are going fucking ape shit. And where else, of course, are they doing that but Twitter? Let's jump into the story real quick. In the documentary, editors Ellen Mayer and Aaron Wickenden weave in narration by Bourdain, pulled from audio clips, show outtakes, video interviews, and audiobooks. However, when asked how he obtained some quotes from Bourdain in a new article in The New Yorker, he said, "I created an AI model of his voice. If you watch the film, other than that line you mentioned," which I'm assuming somewhere in the article they mentioned a specific line, "you probably don't know what the other lines are that were spoken by the AI, and you're not gonna know." Representatives for the documentary noted that the AI voice technology was used for less than 60 seconds. Film critics and documentary filmmakers took to Twitter, because of course they did, in response to the article, expressing their discomfort with the artificially generated voice, which Neville, which is the director, characterized as a modern storytelling technique. Okay, there's more, but I gotta agree with him there. It is. I mean, they've been doing this kind of thing more than just voices. I mean, they did it. Peter Cushing with Star Wars Rogue One. They recreated that guy 100%. Voice, face, everything. He was totally CGI character of a real person who existed not really that long ago, but long enough to where I think people aren't, it's not fresh on their mind. And he was in the original Star Wars, so they recreated this character for quite a few scenes for Rogue One, for continuity's sake. And nobody had a problem with that. I mean, nobody was saying, "Oh, this is not good." I mean, only thing people talked about was whether or not the CGI that they used to create him was good enough or not. Some said it was, some said it wasn't. I thought it looked weird. But nobody had ethical issues with it. But here we're using this guy's voice, and it gets even better. And I do agree with him, whether it's ethical or not, we'll get to that in a moment. But it is a modern storytelling technique. It's technology we have. So the technology is not bad. How we use things, just like medicine. People have issues with certain medicines and things like that. The medicine is not bad. The medical procedure, the practice is not the bad thing. It's how we use it. That's what can or cannot be ethical or not. But anyway, I digress. After the backlash broke out on Twitter, Neville responded to Variety saying, "There were a few sentences that Tony wrote that he never spoke aloud. With the blessing of his estate and literary agent, we used AI technology. It was a modern storytelling technique that I used in a few places where I thought it was important to make Tony's words come alive. I checked, with his widow and his literary executor just to make sure people were cool with that. And they were like, Tony would have been cool with that. I wasn't putting words into his mouth. I was just trying to make them come alive." Okay, so even more so, not only are they're not just creating this guy's voice and having him say random things. No, they're saying things that he actually wrote. As I mentioned, he wrote articles. He was a reporter. So these were his words. He had just never at least been recorded speaking them. And they thought, hey, that would fit in there real good. So they had, what's the difference in using a voice actor? A sound-alike to say someone else's words, or in some cases to say stuff they didn't even. No one has a problem with that. Is it because he's passed away? There are voice actors that do impersonations of famous people that have passed away. Nobody has a problem with it. Okay, yeah, we'll get into the ethical question here in just a minute, but think about it like that. It's not that big deal, especially when it was his actual words. These are words, sentences that he created. He just was never recorded saying them. So that really adds more credence to the whole, I don't think it was really that bad. Also, before we go any further, because this next part gets kind of spicy, I really like how everybody was raving about this movie, saying it was so great. Really, everybody was talking about how this movie was just fantastic. That's really what made me say, well, I think I might watch that, because I had no interest in watching it. But now they were raving all about it. Then this comes out on like Sunday or Monday of this week. Now everybody's going about just saying it's terrible, it's awful, this movie is despicable. One critic even put on there, they just said, I hate it. I'm like, you hate it, and it was in response to this article or this whole situation, but talking about the movie. So because of 60 seconds of audio in a film about someone, you hate the whole fucking movie that less than 3 days ago everybody said was just one of the great Oscar-winning documentary. Now it's terrible because you found out 60 seconds were simulated voice. The fuck? Anywho, let's move on with this story. We're almost done with it because it does get a little spicy. Remember I said that he said he checked with Bourdain's widow and his literary executor and the estate and everything, and they said, yeah, they're good with it. Well, Bourdain's widow, Octavia Boussier, responded to the comment on Twitter saying, I certainly was not the one who said Tony would have been cool with that. Uh-oh. Neville, once again the director, also said that using AI was part of my initial pitch of having Tony narrate the film a la Sunset Boulevard, one of Tony's favorite films and one he had even reenacted himself on Cook's tour. And I didn't mean to imply that Octavia thought Tony would have liked it. All I know is that nobody ever expressed any reservations to me. Now, I don't have the quote here, but a further quote from Octavia, his wife, she did come back after speaking with Neville and said that, yes, she believes that it was more of a miscommunication, that while they did endorse the film, she did not necessarily outright endorse them using AI to recreate his voice. She's not saying she would have been opposed to it. She's just saying she didn't say that, yeah, it was okay and I gave my blessing for that. But she said that the way that the film was framed to her in looking back, she more or less says, okay, yeah, I think looking back at how he phrased that, I could see how he was saying that and we just misunderstood. We had a misunderstanding. I didn't realize he was saying that about that piece. And she said, ultimately, I don't think there was any malicious intent behind what he did. I'm okay with it now because I don't think that he did it. He thought he had our blessing. He thought everything was cool, and based on our conversations, I could see how that could happen. So, shocker, I know, two people in the limelight, just two people in the fucking world, speaking reasonably. I know we're not used to that, people, but that's what's happening here. It's two people that had, said, no, you said this. No, I didn't. And then they talked about it and said, oh, okay, I see what happened, And all right, you know what? Even though it did happen and I didn't initially give my okay, I get it. It's cool. Don't worry about it. Everybody's still up in fucking arms about it on Twitter because, they're holier than thou and all that. And my point here is, here's my opinion on the whole thing. If his widow and his estate, which while they initially, even though he thought they did give their blessing, did not necessarily say that, they weren't opposed to it, and now say, we're more or less okay with it, I'm okay with it. If they say it's okay, they knew the guy better than anybody. That is why this person is the executor of the estate, why she is his wife, or widow rather. They know him more than anyone. So they are the closest thing we can get to someone speaking for him or him speaking himself on what he would want. They said it's okay. Shut the fuck up. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what they think. His estate, his people, the people that cared for him the most, they said it was okay. So you have no fucking say so. Shut your fucking mouths. Get the fuck off Twitter. Go do something more interesting and more, just better with your lives than talking shit about other people. These people came to a consensus and said it was all right. Get the fuck over it. Now go back to, and go and stop saying things are bad because of 60 fucking seconds of something that happened. Get the fuck over yourself. Motherfucker, holier than now, motherfuckers, I hate that shit. You said a movie was good last week and now all of a sudden it's not because you found out, oh no, they used a computer to make something. Fuck off. All right, so yeah, I will definitely be watching this movie because I heard it was really good. I don't care what people are saying about it now. And all this controversy is over fuck all nothing because the people that really matter, whose opinions really matter, said it was okay. And that's about all I got to say about that. Alrighty, heavy stuff out of the way. Glad we came to a happy conclusion on it though, right? Right? Anyway, moving on to something a little bit more lighthearted. Now, this admittedly is a story that I don't have a tremendous amount of interest in, but I am reporting on it because I understand a lot of people do have an interest in this particular property. It ain't my thing. My wife loves it. So I will probably end up having to watch this shit when it comes out. I don't hate it. I don't have anything against it. It's just not for me. I'm talking about the TV series based on Grease, but not just Grease itself, but the Pink Ladies, because the Pink Ladies are coming. Yes, they are making a prequel Grease TV show based on the Pink Ladies called Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies. I know the originality here is just killing me. The Hollywood Reporter has news on the Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies TV series being the first series to get picked up by Paramount Plus. Good for them. The series will focus on Rizzo, Marty, Jan, and Frenchie, the quartet of girls played by Stockard Channing, Dana Minoff, Jamie Donnelly, and Diddy Cohn in the original musical. Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies takes place before rock and roll ruled, before the T-Birds were the coolest in the school. In the series, we'll see 4 fed-up outcast girls dare to have fun on their own terms, sparking a moral panic that will change Rydell High forever. It's not clear when the production might begin, but now that Paramount Plus has officially ordered a 10-part series, it probably won't be long until cameras are rolling. I agree. Yeah, like I said, I don't think anything about this. I'm neither here nor there on it. I've never been a fan of Grease. I have nothing against it. I like some musicals. Grease isn't one of them that I love. I know that's kind of blasphemy. A lot of people love the shit out of this. Well, that was great. In the middle of me talking, it just cut off. Awesome. I was doing really well. I was almost through. All right. So what fucking time is this? Not what time. How long have I been streaming? 18:55? Okay. So I got to cut something out right there at this point with the... Great. More editing I have to do to this motherfucker. Son of a bitch. Yeah, that was OBS, by the way. It just shit out for just a second. Said, hey, guess what? I'm going to fuck your shit up real quick. All right. So I'm going to take it back to my thoughts there. Sorry, guys. Sorry to just break the illusion for a moment. All right. We're almost done, by the way. And then I'll get to the comment section. Where was I? Let's start this thing back. Go back. Right there. So, as I said, I don't really feel neither here nor there about this show because I've never been a fan of the property, really. It's just not my thing. I mean, I know a lot of people love it, and they really are just probably either hyped about this show happening or they're really, like, distraught and think that they're just going to, like, destroy this property or something like that. I don't know. I have no idea. I probably will end up having to watch it, but it will be begrudgingly. So I am interested to know what fans of the original Grease think about this. While it doesn't really move the needle on my side at all, I'm interested to see what you guys think about the whole thing. Hey, I guess it could be fun. It could be cool. A show musical. I mean, it won't be the first musical show that we've ever seen. I mean, obviously, none of these original actresses, I'm sure some of them are still alive, but I doubt any of them are going to be turning up in these roles for sure, unless they're playing much older versions, which the show's about. It's a prequel, so it's going to be younger versions. I don't know. Is it going to have iconic music like the original one did? Who knows? I guess we'll find out. Once again, we don't have like an exact date that this thing is going to start happening, but it, as the article said, it probably won't be long until cameras start rolling. So we'll probably get this show within about a year, maybe a little bit more, depending on how big it is, how big it ends up being. Alrighty. With that one out of the way, we are on to our second to last story. Forgot how to talk there for a minute. Our second to last story of the evening. This is one that I can't say that I'm like surprised by. I totally get why and what's going on here, and I do agree with it, but there is a part of me that is a little bit kind of disappointed because I kind of just, whether I would have watched the whole thing about this cancellation or not, I definitely wanted to see it. I wanted to see the insanity ensue with this particular thing. And there's still another one because 2 of these are in the works, and I just reported on one of them last week. But this week we found out just the other day that The Tiger Cage has been shut. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Nicolas Cage Tiger King Amazon TV show has been canceled. Well, not officially canceled. It's been shelved. The story goes as, according to Variety, the Nicolas Cage Tiger King project has been placed on the shelf and may be shopped around to other outlets. Good luck with that. Meanwhile, Cage himself broke the news that he is no longer attached to the role, saying, "We should clear the record. I read two excellent scripts, which I did think were excellent, but I think Amazon ultimately felt that it was material that had become past tense because it took so long for it to come together. They felt at one point that it was lightning in a bottle, but that point had since faded into the distance and is no longer relevant." All right, so I agree with this. I totally get what he's talking about, because 2020, Tiger King comes out, the documentary or docuseries, and it was huge. It was everywhere. It was memes. Everybody was talking about it. It was just the biggest thing ever. But now it happened. It was huge. It was everywhere, and then it just didn't. It was gone. Like, nobody's talking about it anymore. So when I kept hearing about these things happen, I was like, about these two shows that they're working on at Amazon, and the other one I think is at Paramount or something like that. I can't remember where the other one is. They're working on another one though, that is a bit further along. I was kind of surprised. I was like, how are these shows going to do? Because, I mean, Tiger King's just not really a thing anymore. I mean, people know what it is or know who he is, but that whole thing is just kind of come and gone. It's either going to spark a resurgence of Tiger King like fever, if you will, or people are just going to be like, I don't really care. What I was excited about with this particular one, while the cast of the other one that is coming together nicely has a really cool cast, that really, I think this could be a really interesting, quirky little show that they're, or at least miniseries that they're putting together over there. That one I think might be good, and probably the better of the two from what we'd heard, at least. The Amazon one, I was interested for one main reason alone, and probably the same reason everybody else was, is because Nicolas Cage was going to be playing Joe Exotic. That would have been fucking insane. I wanted to see that so bad. Just so bad, I just wanted to see Nicolas Cage as Joe Exotic. That would have been amazing. I probably wouldn't have watched the whole show, but I definitely would have watched at least the first episode just to see his crazy ass playing Joe Exotic's crazy ass. It was like the perfect role. It was like fan casting for this guy. But alas, we are not going to get that anymore. We're still going to get some Joe Exotic show later on with the other one that's coming from, I cannot remember which studio, but whatever studio is working on one. And it does actually sound like it's shaping up to be something that could be interesting. Whether it'll be successful or not, time will tell. They need to hurry up and get that thing out, though, for sure. But this one, man, I just wish that have they done, I just want to know, have they done like a screen test, or at least like a costume test, kind of like the whole, like Nicolas Cage was cast as Superman in the Tim Burton Superman that they were doing a few years ago, and we got the short videos and the pictures and everything of him dressed up as Superman with the long hair and all that, and the full setup, or get up when they were doing costumes and all that. I want that for Joe Exotic. I just want like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever, of him in full-on Joe Exotic costume with like the hair and everything and the make, just full-on Joe Exotic, just acting like it just for a second, being Nicolas Cage. And I'll be happy. I'll be okay with this whole thing. If we get that from all this shit, I'm a happy man. There's not much more else I want in life as far as this show goes. So if they can give us that, if they can release that, if they've at least done one costume, test, check, whatever, and they release that, I'll be okay. Probably not. We're probably never going to see that shit. It probably didn't happen. Doesn't sound like the show really ever got that far along beyond having Nicolas Cage involved. But man, that would be fucking awesome if it did. That would be so cool. I want that more than a lot of things out there. Alas, it will just have to live on in our imaginations, I guess. Okie dokie, last story of the night, and this one is an interesting one that is actually a similar thing. This company has already tried this some years back, and there's actually a little bit more information, well, speculation rather, I should say, that came out about this story today. And I'll go through this one pretty quick because I know it's not everybody's bag, but I'm talking about there's a company out there. Everybody always talks about when it comes to video game companies, everybody wants to be the Netflix of games. Of course, Microsoft entered with their Game Pass thing. Some of you may have heard me talk about it, may have heard about it, and it is the Netflix for games, where you can, subscription service for video games like Netflix is for movies. It is by far the best service out there like that. Microsoft Game Pass, and people have been saying it's the Netflix of games. Okay, so another company is wanting to get into the mix and become the Netflix of games. And what company would that be, ladies and gentlemen? Well, ironically enough, it would be Netflix. Netflix wants to be the Netflix of games, apparently. But I think there's a lot of different ways we can read this story. It's a short one. Let me throw this out there, and then I'll give you my ideas and some of the things I've heard. Bloomberg has the story that Netflix has hired Mike Verdu to be their vice president of game development. Verdu's background includes time at EA and Facebook, where he worked with developers as they made content for Oculus. His role is expected to be similar for Netflix, as the company plans to offer games alongside their regular offerings of movies, comedy specials, series, etc. And the best part right now is that they're not planning on charging extra for it. The Bloomberg piece is pretty adamant that Netflix is staffing up to develop actual video games. In the past, they've licensed out the rights to some of their IP, like Stranger Things, which has had a mobile and retro style video game tie-in. That is true, because that game was on Game Pass, in fact, and I never played it, but I did see it on there. I thought about playing it. Right now, the only other streaming service that offers anything close to this is Apple Plus. That's not true, which you can bundle with Apple Arcade. You're not going to be playing the latest Call of Duty, but there are hundreds of games available there. Netflix plans on rolling this out by the end of the year, so less than 6 months out. Okay, so here's my thoughts on this. People are looking at this and thinking essentially that Netflix is going to, you're going to turn Netflix on, it's going to have movies, and it's going to have games. Or it's going to be like another lane on there where you have like, thrillers, this, porn, whatever, and then you're going to have one that says games. You go on there, you pick, I want to play this game, that game, whatever, The Witcher, Call of Duty, Fallout, whatever, and you're going to play that game. Okay, this is not real. Well, I'm not going to say it's totally unrealistic. There are only a few ways that this could work. Well, there's a bunch of ways this could work. There's only a few viable ways that this could work and be successful. One is that it only works if you're on Netflix on a PC, where you have, mice and keyboards, so you can connect controllers, where you have a built-in thing to play the game with. I mean, yes, you have remote controls and stuff like that. If you've ever played a game, any like remote control type game, there was like Dragon's Lair and Space Ace and stuff. It's even difficult with those. Playing that sucks. That's not going to be super successful. Maybe some casual things here or there, but they're not going to like blow up. They're not going to burn up the world. That is not going to be the Netflix of games. So PC, I could see them being on there, and you have like an input that you do that with. Yeah, sure. Okay, that could work. It would have to be specific to consoles, such as the only consoles it's on is, Microsoft's consoles, Sony's consoles, so Xbox or PlayStation. They have controllers on them, so obviously you could pick something and you could play it. You could stream a game that way. That could be an option, because I do know a lot of people watch Netflix through their Xboxes and their PlayStations. I do. That's how I consume most Netflix, is through those. Or mobile, and it would be more touch-based mobile gameplay and stuff like that. I mean, yes, you could have touch-based, AAA game experiences as well. Game Pass does do that with their streaming service, where xCloud, where they have a lot of games that have touch support. But that's more of it's not the way you want to play the game. It's great that option is there, but the way you want to play a game is with a controller. And they're talking about making, as they put it, actual games, which I'm assuming they mean like, traditional games, not, mobile or casual games and things like that. So that's how a lot of people are looking at this. They think that's going to be what it is. And some people have recently speculated that Sony is trying to, and this is all speculation, by the way, this part of it, that they are wanting to partner with them to combat Microsoft's Game Pass. I'm not saying that's not what's happening. That may be happening. I've heard like very little about that, and in every single bit of it is speculation and people talking. And when it comes to this space with video games and rumors and things, you think movies are bad? The video game space is rampant with fucking rumors. People just pull shit out of their ass and try and make it a thing and make it happen, and it just doesn't happen. But and there's some true stuff and not. I don't know if Netflix is wanting to constrict themselves that much to one platform. Now, if they came up and said that we will be on all platforms and we'll offer, games, I could see that. But the thing that people aren't looking at, that's the surface level thinking there. That when we see Netflix for games and they got the computer here or the TV here with Netflix and the controller in front of it, all that, that's what we think. But let's think a little bit deeper and look at how some of this is written. I don't think that that's what they're talking about doing. It may be. That might be what they're doing. I don't know. I'm just speculating myself. But it even says, this is word for word, it says this guy, Verdu, his role is expected to be similar for Netflix as the company plans to offer games alongside their regular offerings of movies, comedy specials, series, etc. And the best part right now is that they're not planning on charging extra for it. That makes me think, yeah, they're going to be offering some type of games on their actual service. But then you see Bloomberg's piece is pretty adamant that Netflix is staffing up to develop actual video games. So I'm kind of in the middle. I'm like, okay, are they going to sign deals with current video game publishers and have their games on their service? Or are they wanting to make their own games? And that's what you're going to get. You're going to get Netflix produced games, which Netflix got a shit ton of money. So they definitely have the money to make it happen. But, are they going to be making Netflix produced games? And that's what we're talking about getting? Because if that's the case, these games might be showing up on other platforms, just like as they are now. But the games that we've gotten now, such as Stranger Things, the game, and things like that, those were developed. That was when they took their IP, licensed it out to another company. They made a game, and it went onto the Xbox or PlayStation. I think what this might be is more that Netflix will just be developing in-house. They're going to create their own development studios and be making games of their properties in-house and just putting them on consoles, PC, things like that. I don't see how they could viably put this on the Netflix service and make it work. You're somebody who's using a Roku stick. How are they going to easily do that? Yes, they could get a controller and connect it. Not everybody has a controller. If you're wanting mass appeal, if you're wanting everybody to get a hold of this thing, you've got to make it as easy and simple as possible. That's what makes Netflix great. That's why it works so well, because it's easy. You turn it on, there's pictures, you hit what you want to watch, and you watch it. That's why it works. Having all this extra shit you've got to add to the TV and get, that's counterintuitive to it. I don't know. Once again, this is me speculating to this very vague article, and everybody else, what they're saying is speculation, because Netflix is not going to release any information about it until they're ready to. So we're not going to know anything until they decide to tell us, but we will know something by the end of the year. I do want to throw out one little thing real quick, though. This is not the first time Netflix has tried to get into this space. Netflix tried to get into video games back about 10 or so years ago, when they were combating GameFly, and they didn't do so hot. It fell apart. They actually did get into renting games. This is back when they sent out physical discs and stuff, which I think they might still do, but most people stream. But back when they sent out physical discs and that was their bread and butter, they started to do games for a short period of time, and it just didn't go over well. So this is actually their second foray into the video game market, but it sounds like they're trying to do more development and stuff. But hey, we'll see. Who knows? Maybe they'll come out with something none of us are expecting. We'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, that works. Who knows? We'll find out within 6 months, because it says that this is happening by the end of the year. I don't know, but I'm skeptical, but maybe my view of it all is just not big enough. Maybe I'm not broadening my horizons enough to open my mind enough to see what they could possibly be doing. I don't know. We'll find out soon. Okie dokie, guys. That is it as far as the news stories go for this week. The only other thing I've got after that is a little bit of info about what I got coming this week, plus the releases for this week. Per usual, this week, actually tonight or today, the 20th, we have The Man with the Answers, How It Ends, and The Nest. I do not know what any of those are except for The Nest. As I said, or when I read this a few minutes ago, I realized, hey, I've got a screener for The Nest that was sent to me, and I totally forgot about it. So I might need to watch that and maybe do a review on it. It actually didn't look too bad. I don't remember exactly what it was about, but I remember watching the trailer when I got the screener and thinking, okay, that looks interesting. I'll check it out. So that might be coming soon. I don't know. I just remembered I had the damn screener. I've had it for like a month. I've totally forgot about it. This week on Friday, though, we are getting 2 larger movies and a few smaller ones. We're getting M. Night Shyamalan's newest film, Old, and G.I. Joe Origins Snake Eyes. I will be seeing and reviewing both of those movies. We're also getting Settlers. I have no idea about that. Midnight to the Switchgrass. Never heard of it. Joe Bell, I've heard was a decent flick, a true story. And Hereafter. Heard of it, but can't remember anything about it. That's what we got coming this week, though. And that's nothing really big that's going to contend with like Black Widow or Space Jam, really. Let's be real. Old, maybe if it like gets some word of mouth. I don't know. I know the initial reviews of it are sounding kind of dire, though. As far as my channel goes, though, of course, I do have, like I said, Old and Snake Eyes reviews coming this week. I also have the last video in my video game movie review series coming, 10 best video game movies ever made. Finally, that video is coming. It was supposed to come out a few weeks ago, but then the whole Fear Street thing happened, and I was getting those earlier in the week, and they've been coming out on Wednesdays. So that's coming out and more. Tomorrow night, Retro Wednesday, I will be playing Outlast. And yeah, that's about it. Outlast, by the way, is a scary as shit game. I've played a few minutes of it. That's about it. And a lot of people say, oh, I want a VR version of this. I love VR, but if this game was in VR, I would never play it because it scared the shit out of me in regular view. You put that into a virtual world, and I would have a fucking heart attack. I'm not getting any younger. So let's come join me tomorrow night in playing Outlast to see what true fucking terror is. And that's all I got, guys. Per usual, check out my Discord and my Patreon. They're in the description below. Got some cool tiers with some cool things you can get there and become more involved with the channel. Have some say-so on what happens with the channel and such and on Patreon. Or you don't have to. I just appreciate you guys coming and watching. But if you're interested in that kind of stuff, check it out. My Patreon or my Discord got a lot of good discussions going on there. Trying to get more people to come over there and just come by and talk when you want. You can get some information in advance for what I have going on the channel here there. Yeah, that's about it. Oh, I got a tree spring as well. I think they just call Spring now. I forgot all about that. So if you're interested in some merch, go look at my name on Spring. You can buy a shirt or hoodie or something. But that's all I got. I really appreciate you guys coming out and hanging out with me this week. It was a little slapdash, I know, because I had a bit of an issue with the recording of this podcast originally. So I had to do it live, which I was not planning on doing, but that is what it is. That's how this whole thing works out sometimes. But I really appreciate you guys coming out and hanging out with me for a little while. And yeah, that's all I got. I will see you guys, I guess, tomorrow night, hopefully, on my Outcast live stream. And if not, watch some of my videos, or I'll see you next week. Thanks. Peace.